about my PhD thesis today, which I finished in 2017. And I called my thesis Development as Service. And why did I call it Development as Service? Because I also took note of the book of Amartya Sen, which was called Development as Freedom. So how do we define progress or development? And Amartya Sen said we should move beyond the gross national product idea and look more at people's capabilities, or freeing people so that they can live the life that they value and do and be what they want to be and actualize their capabilities. Now I looked at 3 cosmovisions from the Global South, and I will explain them to you in a very short time. And my conclusion was that what Amartya Sen, though he is from India, did not take into account sufficiently, in my opinion, is the whole element of reciprocity, or life as mutual aid, as the Africans say. So therefore I coined the term development as service, and with the notion service I don't mean service delivery by the state, but I mean service to one another. So I looked at the African philosophy of Ubuntu, which is a Nguni language term, but it also exists in other languages in sub-Saharan Africa. I also looked at the Buddhist happiness concept in Bhutan, which is called Deva in Zonka. And lastly, the Native American Buen, and I looked specifically at the country of Ecuador, or the Quechua people, and the Quechua people also live in Peru and Bolivia and a number of other countries. And then I set that off versus the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a copy of the little booklet. I have a few with me of my summary, my email. So we start with the SDGs, because I started my research actually at the Advisory Council for International Relations in the Netherlands, and we had to do a review of the Millennium Development Goals in 2010. We had to criticize, where we wanted to go from 2015 onwards, which was then the post-2015 development debate, and it resulted in the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, as a policymaker, I'm very happy with the SDGs because they're concise, there are 17 goals, and they put sustainability at the heart. They involve the big consultative process of all the countries in the world, and they're also valid for all countries, unlike the Millennium Development Goals, who were valid only for countries in the Global South, which were called developing countries. Now, after my research, I had been looking at the other well-being philosophies. I actually had to come to the conclusions that the SDGs are still very much centered around a modernist conception of development. And modernist notion of development, I've briefly summarized it, and it's of course a little bit generalized, but it's about sovereignty of humans over their environment, individualism, freedom, as I said, also freedom in the sense of Amartya Sen, so rights rather than duties, self-interest, belief in the market leading to collective welfare, private property, rewards based on merit or meritocracy, private property, materialism, quantification of value, and instrumentalization of labor. The SDGs are also what we call linear result-based, management-based, and they attempted to incorporate a human rights-based approach, though many human rights organizations think that human rights are not sufficiently presented in the SDGs. But of course, the SDGs were also a compromise.
What are SDGs?
Oh, I'm really sorry. The Sustainable Development Goals. So we went from the Millennium Development Goals, which in our jargon are the MDGs, and we formulated the SDGs, and you can see the symbol there, 17 goals, which is about health, education, energy, climate, good governance, and there were only 8 Millennium Goals before that, which were mostly centered around health and education and gender parity. So I'm moving to the first continent that I want to visit with you, which is Africa, or actually I specifically looked at South Africa because I lived there as a student back in 1994. And the word Ubuntu was a word that really struck me as extremely important to the people on the ground. Because I was living in a black student's residence, so I was surrounded by African people. And they explained it to me as a concept that means I am because we are. So it's a collective way of looking at the world. I'm speaking here to you today because you are listening to me, and if you weren't here, there was no use for me to speak to you. So if you come into the world, you come through your mother, and you're not coming on your own. So our Western conception of I'm an individual first, and then comes the collective, or we add up all the individuals and then we form the collective, is the opposite view of the Africans who say you're just a derivative of the collective, so you do not exist without the collective. Now, actually the word Ubuntu, I discovered, goes much deeper than only this I am because we are, because it's an entire cosmology. And in this cosmology is an oral tradition, and it's something you can derive from the language. So there's also this convention that only Europe has a philosophy, or only countries with a written tradition, like Bhutan has Buddhism, is a written tradition, have a philosophy. Now the Africans say that is a very colonial way of looking at us, because we have a different way of embodying our philosophy. If you look at our philosophy or our way of thinking of life, you have to look at our language. Now, if you look at the language in the Uni languages, you see that a lot of words end with the word ntu. So the word Ubuntu can be split into the word ubu and the word ntu. And the word ubu actually means abstract patterns, or the potential of being before it comes to life. And the word ntu actually means the life force bringing the potential to life. So I've tried to put that in a picture, which the black circle I put, the ubu, the abstract life patterns, and in the middle I put the life force streams that brings that to life. Now, if you look at the word for people in Zulu language, it's the word Bantu in plural. That consists of the word ba and ntu. So ba is people in potential, and ntu brings the people in potential to life. But what is also very interesting about the word Bantu is that it does not only include the people who are living now, but it also includes our ancestors, or what they call living dead. It's here in the purple circle. The ancestors, or the people who are yet to be born, which I put here, unborn, future generations. And all of these together is people, the people of the now. So actually, before starting my lecture, I should have first invited the ancestors and the future generations to also take part, because they're part of our community of life. So here. And here you see a nice picture of the Culture and Development Dialogue in 2015 in one of the African countries. We're going to come back to this. First, we're going to move to Bhutan. Well, I think most people are familiar with the gross national happiness concept. For those people who are not, I've just listed here the 4 pillars, where culture is the basic foundation of the idea of well-being and identity, and it's added social economic dimensions, nature, and governance. And I think OPI and Bhutan did a very good job in putting it into an index, and I've put here the dimensions of the index, which have many unusual domains. For example, time use, so the balance between your work and sleep. Cultural diversity, which is about the national etiquette, it's about whether people speak their native language, cultural participation, and artistic skills. The other unusual one is community vitality, and for example, ecological diversity. So I'm not going to go into all of these domains, just wanted to show it to those people who are not so familiar with G&H. Now, G&H is founded more on the Buddhist concept of happiness, and sometimes I think the word happiness is a bit of an unfortunate term, and I would prefer, together with Michael Rutland, the word harmony, because I think how Buddhism or Bhutanese conceptualize happiness is a little bit different from how Western people understand that word. So often I get these cynic questions of people saying, so Bhutan are the happiest people in the world. And I say to them, no, that's not the case. In Bhutan, people believe that happiness consists of inner harmony and peace, and that is founded on the whole idea of the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, and walking the middle path, living a simple life, and being in harmony with yourself, with others, nature. And underlying this, and I'm showing this picture because I want to go back to the Ubuntu idea, is a symbol of yin-yang. Now, in yin-yang, you also have the patterns, which is here the masculine, heavenly space, and here the matter, the maternal yin. And I was really surprised to find that Ubu and the two actually are very similar to this, because Natu is here and Ubu is here. So even though Africa and Asia are very far apart, there are certain similarities in the formulation of their cosmology. I'm not going to go into this. We're moving to yet another continent, and that is the continent of Latin America. But I look mostly at Native American philosophy, and I think there is a common denominator, even though I might be generalizing a little bit, between all native peoples of North and Southern America. And in the Quechua philosophy, they call that Suma Causai. And Suma Causai actually translates in Spanish into Buen, Vivir, or Vivir Bien in Bolivia, and it's translated as good living. Now, good living actually means the right way of living. It doesn't mean, have a good life, which is, again, a very difficult translational issue. And if you look at this picture, you see here Mother Earth, because Mother Earth is very central in all the Native American philosophies. So we call that a biocentric way of looking at life. So it's first of all about harmony with nature. And from harmony with nature, we can also live in harmony with ourselves and with others. There's also a concept of the balance between the spiritual and material wealth, which is also very much present in Buddhist happiness. And it emphasizes a cyclical way of development. So there is no linear idea of progress. Everything is seasonal and everything comes and goes. And actually, everything is spiral. And I interpret that personally as if you live your life, the same lessons come again and again. If you learn from your lesson, your spiral goes up. If you do not learn from your lesson, your spiral may go down. But that is my own interpretation. Now, I really like this picture because it's a picture of nature and music and animals. And there's also a human in the picture. I don't know whether you see any human here. If you look very careful, it's there. So actually, the biocentric life sees the human as subject and equal to all the other living beings, whether those living beings are animate or inanimate. So like in Bhutan, mountains are sacred and they're occupied by spirits. The spirits are called apus. And all of that life, whether that is a stone or whether that's an animal or a human, they all have equal value. And that concept of Buen Vivir led to this concept of rights of nature in the Ecuadorian constitution and also in the constitution of Bolivia. And it also led to an international declaration for the rights of Mother Earth. So as I am a lawyer, I also looked at the jurisprudence. So I looked at the constitution of Bhutan and a little bit of the jurisprudence that there is on happiness in Bhutan, and also looked at the jurisprudence of the rights of nature. So it actually means that nature has a right for its own being and for its own restoration, and any human being can stand up for nature and go to court and say nature is not being honored here, and therefore we need a restoration process. There's a lot to be said on how it's being implemented, because it's very difficult, because Ecuador and Bolivia are very dependent on natural resource exploration. But this is the idea. Now what I did in my summary, and again this is a very short generalized subject, I've also done the comparison with all the SDGs, giving examples of how Ubuntu or happiness views certain SDGs. But my professor wanted me to come up with some general conclusions, so I said, I feel a little bit like a marketing agency, but I've tried to put both philosophies in one or two sentences. So we go here to the first line. The perspective on the SDGs is a universalist perspective. So the UN member states claim that the SDGs are universal values because they were embraced by the UN member states. They were negotiated by all countries, so all countries had a say of what comes into the goals and what does not. And there was a large consultation with civil society. About 5 million people and organizations were consulted. Now I asked people in Bhutan, how do you view these SDGs? And Bhutan was, of course, in the forefront of the whole debate with the 2012 conference in New York on environmental well-being. 1 minute. So they were quite upbeat. They said, you know, we're really happy that the world is finally catching up with us and viewing well-being in a broader sense than GDP. And we're really happy because our GNH index is actually larger than the SDGs, and we can easily incorporate the SDGs. So it was a sort of a middle position. Now, I also asked people in Africa, and they took a very pragmatic approach. And I always have to a little bit laugh when they say this, because they say, well, you know, we've had so many schemes all over the years, we just please the global north, and we get our funding, and then we're just going to do our own thing. We'll see how sort of incorporated in our, you know, national planning and finance departments. Then people went to Vivir, and then I spoke, of course, to the Native Americans, so which is not the majority. And they actually said we're really wary of these kind of mental frameworks, and they even referred to it as a mental masturbation. There's more than one person who said that to me, and some people even actually got angry with me when I went to one tribe, the Achua tribe, and I talked about what the SDGs were. They actually threw me out of the meeting because they said, you know, we're trying to wait, we already have these rights, and you're trying to take those rights away from us. And our life has not improved over the last 50 years. So, if we would redefine the whole theme of the SDGs according to different philosophies, and the SDGs embrace the slogan, leave no one behind. Now, leave no one behind also suggests, again, a linear progress in the sense that some countries are here and other countries are here, and we have to catch up. It's a little bit, like the previous speaker said, it's all about the definition of what is happiness and progress. If you would define happiness and progress in Buddhist sense, or Buddhist sense, I think the slogan would rather be respect all beings, respect all sentient beings. Again, moving to Africa, everything is about relationships. So Africans have as their main slogan, life is mutual aid. So life is mutual aid is a horizontal way of looking, it's not a vertical way. It's again the concept of reciprocity and altruism. And if we go to Latin American one here, I would say the slogan would be, let Mother Earth lead. So we're not in the lead as humans. We have to follow Mother Earth, and if we don't do so, we're going to be in big trouble. So the Native Americans were very active in the environmental movement. Again, if we go to the concept of development, I'm skipping these because we don't have enough time. Concept of development in the SDGs is, again, economic growth, and then we put sustainable in front. We never really worry about whether those two are contradictory terminus or whether they do go together. So it's still goal 8 is sustainable growth, and that's the definition of progress. And actually it says the target is 7% of economic growth, so that's about the economic growth of China. So you can imagine how much resources we're going to be consuming if we're going to all fulfill the SDGs. If we look at the concept of development in Buddhist happiness, I think it's very much about inner peace and balance and achieving harmony, and that harmony also includes nature and others. If you look at the concept of development in Ubuntu, or for example in super languages called Vato. It's all about human relations. So they said development, what is that? It's an abstract thing. We're here as humans, everything is about humans and our interrelationship. Again, it's mutual aid. And that interrelationship includes the earth because it includes the previous generations and it includes the future generations. And the ancestors are connected to the earth. For Vivir, it's all about the biocentric intersubject relationship, so our relationship with nature. So I don't think I have a lot of time, so I'm going to conclude the last paragraph here. Again, to put it in a few words, I still think the SDGs, because they are a goal-oriented, result-based management scheme, and we sometimes say it's the death of ideology, so our ideology is now measuring. I think it's also very much based still on the idea in the West is about doing and producing. And so doing what is good for yourself, and along that we also do what's good for others. We go to happiness. I think a center or core value is contemplation. So contemplating yourself and contemplating the other. If I go to Africa, if I have to put it in one sentence, it's very much about feeling engagement with the others. It's not emotional, but it's about feeling for the other. And if I go to Latin America or the Native Americans, there's a very subtle difference with Bhutan. It's not contemplation, but it's about being. It's most of all about being in harmony with yourself and with the universe. Sorry, being in harmony with nature and with the universe. More categories, we're going to skip this. I also did something on leadership styles and which goals are missing. I think main goals missing are about culture and spirituality, but also the whole idea of community is not present in the SDGs. Community, diversity, and wholeness. Of course, integrality is there. So, and we also have to be fair, the SDGs were a large compromise of many countries, so it was a great achievement in itself. I think they attached my summary to the abstract, and you can also find the entire thesis online if you Google on development as service and my name. You will find it. It's about 600 pages, so whatever philosophy you're most interested in, you can look at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dorine.